The following program is a presentation of the Civil War Broadcasting Network, available on the free YouTube channel General Grant by Himself by Dr. E.C. Fields, on the Facebook page Kurt Fields as General Ulysses S. Grant, and on various other social media. Permission to copy and distribute is given and indeed encouraged. Remember, you are the future of our past. And now, in the ongoing series of General Grant Looks at the American Civil War, some reflections by Captain Grant at Camp Yates in Springfield, Illinois, before he got his commission as a colonel. I am Captain Ulysses S. Grant. I'm here in temporary command of Camp Yates in Springfield, Illinois. John Pope has been in command here, but when he did not get the general's appointment that he was anticipating, he abruptly resigned and went to St. Louis to visit with General Fremont to see if he couldn't secure a brigadier general's appointment. I certainly hope he does. Governor Yates sought about himself and asked me if I would take temporary command. Today is my last day. I've been in command 3 days. I still have no rank. I go by captain because that was my rank that I attained in the old Army. I'm addressed as Captain Grant. But I was talking to some fellows today and reminiscing about my life in St. Louis. And I should like to reflect about some of those adventures, perhaps, that I had in those 6 years at St. Louis. When I first got there in late 54, we had more or less of a second honeymoon. And then into 55, I had to start making some money. And the only way to make any money was to cut the wood. The wood being on the 60 acres that Colonel Dent had given Julia. And that before I could farm it, it had to be cleared. I was selling the wood because that was my only way to make any money. But I noticed as I'm cutting the wood, two things. First of all, that Colonel Dent had a man full time cutting wood to warm the house there at Whitehaven. And the other notice I took was that the coal mines in the area were looking for shoring timbers for the mine shafts. And they wanted, actually saplings would do, and they were paying 50 cents the sapling. I put the pencil to this and told Colonel Dent that I could make enough money in 1 day at the local colliery coal mine, selling them saplings for timbers to buy enough coal to heat Whitehaven for a month. And then the next time I go over there and sell saplings, I'll buy a stove, make enough money to buy a stove to put in every room for that 1 day's sales. Colonel Dent gave me his approval, and I did just that. I made enough money that 1 day to buy enough coal to heat Whitehaven a month. The next time I went, I bought a new stove for every room in the house. And so we're warm, everybody's warmer than they were, and that one man chopping wood every day, all day, is now doing something else. So it was good to have, I expect, an old quartermaster around the property who's observing how things get done and what needs to get done. There was a pleasure that I had in doing that too, because I got to work with Tom and Bill. They were my two horses. I bought them from a railroad express agency friend there in St. Louis, whom I had met while I was at Sackett's Harbor. He now lives in St. Louis. And he gave me a really good deal on these two horses, Tom and Bill. They were two good animals, good team. Made me think of my childhood days moving wood when I had Dave, my horse, working with me. Brought back good memories. There was a pressure to move. I had to cut that wood to clear that land. because I was living there in Whitehaven with Colonel Dent, and he and I don't get along that well, and he's particularly contentious on the subject of slavery, and my views on slavery are changing. And in fact, Mary Robinson, the old cook, wonderful woman, the slave cook that was there, tells people that I am frequently saying that I want to free all of the slaves at Whitehaven if I can, as soon as I can, and she's right. But Mary Robinson has a dog named Leo. Leo bears mentioning because he's got a talent for catching chickens. So when Mary needs a chicken or chickens to prepare, she puts Leo on the chickens and he brings her all she wants. And I was watching this, I was mesmerized by this process. Mary would pick out the chicken that she would want, tell Leo that's the one. Leo grabs the chicken and brings it back. But on one particular day, I was out there watching, and Leo kept getting chickens after Mary had all she wanted. But this is something that Mary had to say. A local newspaper ran an article that they interviewed Mary, and she said this about Leo the dog: all I would have to do would be to point out the chicken I wanted to Leo, and he'd grab it for me. Mr. Grant sat and watched us one day, and after I secured all I needed, Leo continued to catch them. Now this amused Mr. Grant very much, and turning to me, he said, "Mamie, that dog has gone into business on his own hook since you and he dissolved your partnership." Oh, she thought that was most funny. In fact, she tells it I understand to this day. And I still think about Leo, the chicken catching dog, who went into business for himself. Well, I have some pressure too from Colonel Dent to get out of the house, because he's fond of rumbling that Julia has not married well. Now, all four of his sons have married well, women of commensurate social status, and the one daughter that he's got, Nellie, had married a physician there in St. Louis and was doing quite well. Well, now his favorite daughter and oldest daughter, Julia, who's married me, he's fond of saying at every opportunity, has not done so well in marriage. And I was wanting to get away from that if I could, so we moved into Wish-ton-Wish. Her brother Lewis is home while he's in California for the gold rush. And I'm still cutting down the wood and being busy, but I've got some time for some social life. Now, Julia loves to dance. I do not dance. I'm tone deaf. Music is just so much noise to me. But Julia loves to dance, and we go to the dances. And on one particular barn dance that we went to, I was playing cards with the men over to the side and smoking a cigar. And a local fella comes in. He'd been in the jug a bit too much and was obnoxious and loud and rude and offensive. No one else said anything to him. I walked over to him. He's a bit bigger fellow than I was. And I went to him and said, "You really need to leave. You've had a little too much to drink. Why don't you go on home?" Well, he turned to me and told me what he thought of me and pretty much everybody in my family, and that he wasn't going anywhere. Of course, this last few words was said over his shoulder, because I grabbed him by the collar and the seat of his breeches and ran him out that barn door and threw him in the dirt in front of the barn and told him, "Don't come back." And he didn't. Well, the other side of that is that I am frequently donating money for or to people that need it. A widow whose cow has died, someone whose house is burned down, I will give all that I can give to help them out, because I feel it is the thing to do. Now, we need all the money that we've got, but when people are in need, house burning, cow dying, some tragedy, I help folks out to the point that it hurts us. And they wanted to build a church. And I contributed to that. And I said, when I contributed to it, gave all I could and a bit more, that we need a church in this neighborhood. I do not attend very much, but Julia and our children do. And I think it's important that the children where we live here have a Sabbath school that they can attend. So I contributed heavily to building the church in our neighborhood. Another story that I'd like to tell you is about the mule that kept coming back. A friend of mine, I want to say an old friend, but I've met him since I've been in St. Louis, and he's an old man, so I finally refer to him as my old friend, came up to me one particular day and said, Captain Grant, that mule that I had has been taken away from me. A lawyer came with a constable and took that mule and said I didn't have proper paperwork to own him, and he's putting him up for auction. Well, I looked into the matter, and the mule was indeed up for auction. I don't recall what was wrong with the purchase paperwork, but it was up for auction, and I bid on it and bought it for $20. I had to borrow a lot of that because I didn't have $20, but my friend needed his mule to farm. So I bought the mule, turned it over, and gave it back to him. A couple of days later, constable comes walking down the road past my home, and I saw the mule, and I said, why do you have that mule again? And he said, because the lawyer came to me and said there's something about change of possession. I don't know, Captain Grant, but he says the mule still belongs to him. All right, I said, what's going to happen? He's going to put it up for auction. Well, I went to the auction, and I bid $5 and got the mule. Nobody bid against me because everybody knew what I was doing, that I was going to give the mule back to my old friend. And I did. I gave him the mule after I paid the $5. 3 or 4 days later, I'm sitting there in front of my house working, and here comes the constable again. Got that mule again. I'm disturbed by now. I walked out and stopped him and asked him, why do you have that mule again? And he said, because this lawyer's come back to me and said, he still owns the mule, the paperwork ain't right. And I was disturbed, and he said, Captain Grant, I understand, but all I can do is serve the papers that court gives me. And I understood that. He's up for auction again, though. I went to the auction, and this time I paid $1 for him. And again, everybody knew what I was doing, so nobody bid against me. I bought that mule for $1. I gave him back to my friend, and I said, I'm going to buy this mule every week, all summer, if I have to. I mean to have this mule for him. A couple of days later, after I thought on it a while, I went back to my old friend and I said, I want you to take that mule 25 miles over into the neighboring county. Take him over there, swap him for another mule, and bring that one back. And we'll put this matter to rest. That mule in question will be in another county. And the old fellow did just that. He comes back and gave me the halter leading the mule, and I gave it back to him, and I said, I'm going to rent you this mule for 1 penny per month. Is that all right with you? And he said, well, yes, of course it is, Captain. Are you sure you want to do that? Yes, I do. I'm going to rent the mule to you for 1 penny per month. And I never went back to collect any rent. The old fellow's fond of telling people, I understand, you know, Captain Grant has not been around here ever since. And he's never asked me for that mule, and he's never collected his 1 penny rent. I guess I did a good thing, but that mule kept coming back. I kept on coming back. But I took care of that issue. Now is another matter that I would like to talk about, and that's the selling of the wood. Well, see, my neighbors, the issue here, they'd get up early of a morning and go into St. Louis and sell their wood. Wood sells for $5 the cord. Now, I would stay home, sleep later in the morning, get out, load my wagon, take it into St. Louis. You see, there's only time to make one trip per day. And I would load mine, take it in the afternoon, later in the day, and I would meet all of my neighbors coming home. They'd already sold their wood. Of course, they frowned and they talked. You know how people talk, and they say, "Well, Grant's sleeping late, he's burning daylight, being lazy." Well, I wrote this down, took some notes, and I said, the fact that their laborers were over bothered me not at all. I lost nothing and gained considerable. It was only possible to make one trip a day, so by taking my morning nap, I yet had plenty of time to reach the city, dispose of my wood, and return home before dark. So it turns out that my neighbors who grumbled about me sleeping late, they lost their sleep and gained nothing in the price. I gained my sleep and lost nothing in the price of the wood. I thought it was a very balanced way to look at things, and I felt everybody was happy. Now, there's one more instance that I'd like to talk about, and that's the wood thief. And that's a low down man, because by the time I chop that wood and stack that cordwood and get it ready to load for the next day, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. And I go out to the wood pile one particular morning to load up my wagon, and a lot of my wood's gone. No way to tell who did it. Didn't think about how I might be able to see any way to find out who did it. So I went about my business, cut some more wood. Wasn't too many days before I go out to my wood of a morning, and I've had more wood stolen. Well, I put a great deal of thought to it, put my head on it, and knew what to do this time. So I went ahead and cut my wood, stacked it off just as I always did, to come back out the next morning and load my wagon. But this time, it was a very dark night. This time I went over just a little off in the distance and sat on a stump, and I waited. Well, after midnight, I didn't have to wait too long, but after midnight, here comes my man, my wood thief. I sat my stump there and watched him load that wagon that he'd ridden up in. He loaded that whole cord of wood. That's when I got up and walked out of the darkness and said, "I thank you for loading that wood for me. Now you take that wagon, drive it to my house and park it in front. I'll take it in the next day, tomorrow, sell the wood and bring your wagon back. And while we're at it, you owe me for half of the wood that I figure you have stolen." Well, he said, "I'll not do it." He became verbally abusive, one might say. And I grabbed him, I throttled him round his collar, threw him on the ground, measured his length on the ground. And he thought I was going to do him some harm, I expect, because he said, no, don't hurt me. I'll do it. I'll pay you for the wood. I'll deliver the wagon and pay you for the wood. Just don't tell anybody that I paid you for the wood. I thought that odd, but it suited me. So I got the wood delivered to my home, and he did pay me what I told him I thought he owed me for the wood that he had stolen. So I was always trying to do some good for my neighbors, trying to help people that I knew were in need of help, to the point that it frequently hurt me and my family. But I was compelled to help folks who were having troubles. And a couple of times I bared my fangs a little bit, threw the fellow out of the barn dance, and I took that fellow stealing my wood, measured his length on the ground, and it was about to make him believe that he should not steal my wood before he hollered that he paid me what I thought he owed me. But now I'm here at Camp Yates, and I'm waiting for, hopefully, to get a commission as a colonel, perhaps command a regiment. I certainly hope that does come to pass. But for the moment, I believe that I have talked quite enough. I've got a training camp of instruction here at Camp Yates with a number of men that are in need of discipline, and I must be about my business. So until we come together again, I'm Captain Ulysses S. Grant, and I bid you a fond farewell.